Okay, we're back with more sine and cosine graphing. Let's pick up where we left off with something that has a C and an A, and let's do a fraction for a B. Okay, so C is the midline, A is the amplitude, which is the distance from the midline to the top and the midline to the bottom. And B finds this period by doing 2 pi divided by B. So in this problem, that'll be 2 pi divided by 1/2. When you divide by a fraction, that's the same as multiplying by a reciprocal. So 2 pi over 1 makes 2 pi be a fraction. Then we'll times by 2 over 1, which is the reciprocal of 1/2. So we'll get 4 pi for period. So scale, remember we divide by 4 every time to figure out what the 4 tick marks need to be labeled. So 4 pi divided by 4, the 4's cancel. We'll be counting by pi on our x-axis. Okay, so to graph this, we're going to need to give ourselves a lot of room at the top, because if the midline's 4 and the amplitude's 3, we're going to need to get all the way up to 7, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, there's my midline. The amplitude's 3, so I'm going to go 3 down, so 3, 2, 1. The bottom will be a 1, and 3 up, 5, 6, 7. So 4 plus 3 is the top, and 4 minus 3 is the bottom. All right, our scale on our x-axis was pi, so we're going to start at 0, and then we have 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, and 4 pi. And then we looked back at our type of function. It's sine, and sine starts in the middle. It's the one that makes middle, top, middle, bottom, middle for its shape. So our middle is 4. Our top at the next tick mark is 7. Back to the middle. At the next tick mark we're at the bottom, and at the last tick mark we're back up at the top. Here is one cycle of cosine. Remember, of course, it would keep going this pattern indefinitely, but we are going to graph one cycle accurately. Alright, so let's try something else. Let's try y equals negative 3 cosine 2x. Well, this time we don't start with a number, which means we don't have a c. That means our midline is not there, so it'll be 0. 3 is the amplitude, and 2, we're going to do 2 pi divided by 2, so the 2's will cancel. Pi is the period. So pi divided by 4 is the scale. Alright, so let's figure out what this x and y axis will be, and then we'll worry about that negative. Okay, this time the midline is 0, so I'm going to center the x-axis. My amplitude is 3, so I'm going to need 1, 2, 3 spaces above 0, and 1, 2, 3 spaces below 0. So half my graph is above and half my graph is below the x-axis. The scale is pi over 4, so 0, then pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, and 4 pi over 4, otherwise known as pi, which is the period, so we know we're done. Okay, so we look up there and we say, hey, cosine makes that U shape. So usually cosine starts at the top, but this is negative cosine, and that negative flips it over. So that's going to start at the bottom. So my first point's not positive 3, like it would be if it was positive cosine. It's going to be negative 3. And then at the next tick mark, I'm in the middle. And then it's at the top. And then it's in the middle. And then it's at the bottom. If my cosine is negative, then it'll kind of make a hill. It'll be flipped over. Positive cosine makes a U shape. Negative cosine makes a hill. Okay, so let's find out what negative sine does, shall we? Let's say we had y equals 3 minus sine x. We're missing numbers this time. We have no number in front of sine, so it must be an invisible 1. We have no number in front of the x, so it must be an invisible 1. So 3 is C, that's our midline. Our amplitude, our distance from the midline, is 1. And B is 1. So 2 pi divided by 1 will stay 2 pi. That's my period, which is the length of the pattern. And I divide that by 4 to get the scale. 2/4 is 1/2, so pi over 2 is the scale that I'm going to count by on the x-axis. Okay, so planning it out. I'm going to need more positive space than negative space because I need a midline of positive 3. There's going to be my middle. My amplitude is 1, so that's going to be 1 space higher to 4 for the top, and 1 space lower than 3 to 2 for the bottom. The amplitude is the number of spaces above the middle and below the middle that you get to count. Our x-axis scale will start at 0, and then we'll go to pi over 2. 2 pi over 2. You can write pi if you want, since the 2's cancel. 3 pi over 2. And 4 pi over 2, which is 2 pi, which is the period. So we know we're done. Okay, so what about negative sine? Positive sine, it goes middle, top, middle, bottom, middle. Negative sine is flipped over. It'll still start at the middle. You can't flip the middle, but instead of going to the top, it'll go to the bottom. Then come back to the middle, then go to the top, then come back to the middle. So our midline was 3, so our middle is at 3. And since it's negative sine, it'll go to the bottom. And then it'll come back to the middle for the 3rd place. And the 4th place, it'll go up to the top finally. And at the 4th tick mark, it'll be back at the middle. So middle, bottom, middle, top. Negative sine. If it kept going, it would keep going. It's periodic, so it repeats for infinity. Okay, hopefully that'll be a good start for you. You got a little bit of everything. And ask questions if you get stuck.